All right, so for those of you who may not know me, my name is Tad Farmer, and I'm just honored to be, first of all, just here at BYU and be in IP&T. I just feel like I've been blessed so much by having this opportunity and also to have the opportunity to teach. When I applied for the program about 1.5 years ago, I got an email just a couple weeks after the application from Dr. West, and he asked if I'd be willing to teach, which was kind of a surprise for me because I didn't even know I was in the program. So I felt like that was actually a pretty good sign that I made it. So I was so grateful. Brother West he's not here. Brother West is also my board, so it's hard for me to balance the names, I guess. But I'm grateful for Dr. West because he really has given me a lot of great opportunities. When I was asked to teach a class in IP&T 286, I was actually working as a 9th grade geography teacher in South Jordan. And so it was really a great opportunity for me to continue that profession that I had chosen by teaching here at BYU. And to me, teaching is a really important and significant experience because I feel like all of us have come to earth with a potential to do great things. And whatever you're teaching, whether it's a gospel topic or if it was geography in 9th grade, all teachers have a capacity and the ability to build the students in their classes. And to me, I just feel like teaching is such a spiritual endeavor that's very, very sacred because you're really assisting people in trying to fulfill the measure of their creation. So I'm really glad that I've had the opportunity to teach here in the department. And I just want to share just a few things. So in terms of my experience, so ever since I started the program 1 year ago, I've taught or co-taught 6 different classes in IP&T 286. Which, for those of you who may not know, that's a class that's designed for pre-service educators to learn how to successfully integrate technology into their classes. Most of those courses have been blended, where it's about 50% face-to-face, 50% online. But currently I'm teaching actually an online version of IP&T 286, which is kind of an interesting experience. I'm learning quite a bit. A while ago, the department, or the college, I'm not sure exactly how it went down, they were accredited, and when the accreditors came back, they said, you're not teaching pre-service educators enough technology courses. And so, which is basically what we've been preaching from the very beginning. We need to teach more technology. And so what we've done with that 1 credit 286 class is we've blown it up into 3 different 1 credit classes to try to help prepare pre-service teachers better for technology in the classroom. So I've been a significant part of helping to design that curriculum, which includes not just curriculum design, but also some storyboarding for some instructional videos. And then I've also had my hand in developing a website for badges, because badges are kind of a central component of this course that I've been teaching. So that's just a little bit about the opportunities that I've had in teaching within the department, which I'm so grateful for. Some of you are actually teaching these classes too, and I'm sure you can say a lot of the same great things about it. For those of you who may not have the same opportunity to teach this course, I just wanted to share a few of the lessons that I've learned from teaching 286, and in hopes that it could apply to your own teaching experiences, whether it's in the church, whether it's at home, or maybe in a more formal classroom setting. So I just want to share briefly 3 lessons that I've learned. The first lesson that I've learned is that learning and teaching are incremental and iterative processes. When I first started teaching 286, we got together with a lot of the 286 teachers, including Emily and Dr. West and others, and we tried to figure out how do we really engage students effectively in an online setting, specifically with online conversations, because the traditional platforms that we used weren't really that effective. Students weren't really engaging very well. So we decided to do a little experiment, and we decided, since everyone's on Facebook all the time, why don't we just conduct those kinds of experiences through Facebook? So that's what we did, and we learned that basically it was a miserable failure. Okay, and the reason why I just wanted to mention that is because at the very beginning of the course, you don't know how that course should look like. Even in my professional teaching as a public school teacher, I wish that I had a perfect course from day one, but I didn't. So from this experience, it was just another evidence that, teaching and learning, we get a little bit of the idea of what the design should look like, 1 step at a time, 1 inch at a time. Now, when we consider learning, I think we would all be comfortable saying that learning is very much incremental, that we learn, as the scriptures say, line upon line, precept on precept, knowledge upon knowledge. And we're actually pretty comfortable, and patient as learners, because we know the first day in a Spanish class, we're not going to be fluent in Spanish, so we're comfortable with it. But for me as a teacher, I feel the same way as I do as a learner, that teaching isn't going to be perfect starting day one, but that there's lessons that we're going to learn through the course of a semester that's going to inform a better practice for the next semester. And to me, this principle is actually a call to action. So not only is it help me get some patience, I guess, for myself as a teacher, but it also helps me say, what am I doing in this course that isn't quite as effective as it can be? And what can I do that will help the experience be a little bit better for my students? So in public school teaching, there were a lot of conversations about, don't just teach the same course 30 times, teach 30 years. So the whole idea is that one course shouldn't look the same the next semester, because they're different students, different situations, and times are changing. And so to me, I really I found a lot of comfort and joy in this statement that both in learning and teaching, I should be patient knowing that I, the teacher, I'm growing and I'm developing slowly over time. And so that's been an important principle that I've learned through this experience. The second one is that questions are an important part to any educational experience. An example from 286 that I'd like to just share really quickly is that at the end of the last winter semester, as part of the final, I found this, actually Emily found it, I can't take credit for it, this 5-minute blended example of a school, I think it was in California, they were doing some really, really innovative things with customized learning, personalized learning paths, some really, really cool things that were only made possible through technology. So I thought that, by showing my students this really cool example, that they'd get excited about it, but when I did it, I was really surprised by their reactions. So instead of asking questions about how that setting is really redefining learning, they were asking questions about, well, what about classroom management? What about how much screen time our students are facing? And I was just shocked because those questions were not anticipated by me at all. And when I came to the program, as I mentioned, I was a teacher for 4 years, and my experience had taught me certain things and raised questions and concerns in my mind that were very, very different than the questions of my pre-service educators. And so what they provided for me are like a window. So when your students ask questions, it allows you as a teacher an opportunity to peer into their soul in a way and say, what are they concerned about? And so if you really pay attention to their questions, then you can really understand where they are in position to what you want to teach. And from that point on, you can really cater and customize the learning to what they're specifically concerned about. And this has actually become kind of morphed into what I'm working on with my thesis, dealing with concerns of online educators. But just like in my school situation, it's the same thing for us spiritually. That as we go to the Lord with questions regarding our personal situations or gospel principles, that He, as a perfect teacher, has an opportunity to really cater and customize learning for our benefit. So questions to me are just so important as a teacher, to not only ask questions, but also to solicit questions from our students as well. Because they're going to tell us things that we won't get from any other source. The third principle that I just want to briefly mention is that good teaching encourages the growth of student confidence. So Dr. West, when he organized a course, I can't take credit for this, one of his learning outcomes was to help students develop a confidence in using technology. So he wanted all of our students to leave this course not feeling intimidated or scared to use technology, but having confidence knowing that they can go into a classroom, experiment with technology, and produce some kind of an effective learning experience for their students. I don't know how many of you had the experience, but I just saw it all the time as a teacher that a lot of the veteran teachers, they were petrified with using technology. They almost felt like they were walking a tightrope, because as soon as that tightrope maybe failed, then nothing was there to catch them from really falling into this chaotic disaster. So we really wanted our students to leave our classroom with confidence in using technology. To me, I think confidence is equal to faith. In fact, the Bible dictionary talks about how faith is having confidence without reservation. So faith and confidence in a lot of ways are very, very synonymous with each other. So in all of our learning situations, then we should always be striving to seek to develop the faith and confidence of our students. So in a spiritual setting, as a father, as a Sunday school teacher, my purpose in being organized in that kind of a setting is to help my students have greater faith in Jesus Christ. So in all of our teaching situations, it's the same kind of thing. What can we do as instructors to not just improve their knowledge and their understanding, but also to improve or increase their ability to act. So the last thing I just want to share, my time is basically up. This is a common scripture. He that preacheth, the teacher, and he that receiveth, understand one another, and both are edified. This is where it gets blurry. As a teacher of IP&T 286 and throughout other teaching experiences, more than anything else, I've been very much the learner in all those situations. And I've become very, very comfortable being the learner. And I love the opportunity to teach because it really is a call and an opportunity to be the ultimate learner. Thanks.
Okay, Curtis, you there?
You have to turn the volume up.
In June, I am an evaluator now at BYU Idaho in the online learning program. I'm having a lot of fun up here in Rexburg, Idaho. I have the opportunity to share with you about my research projects that I got to work on as a student. This is the research team that I got to spend a lot of time with as a student. Charles Graham was my mentor and had a lot of opportunities to work with different people with a lot of different skills. It was a lot of fun to make these friendships and to get to utilize other people's strengths. If I had one recommendation for you, if you can, try to get involved in any kind of research project that you can with the IP&T program. It's awesome to work closely with a professor and with other students. Even if you're an instructional designer, if that's the route that you want to take, it can be so beneficial to be involved in research. The first project I wanted to talk about today was one of my first projects I got to work on as a student. It was a book chapter that I got to write with Dr. Graham and Dr. Gibbons. And Lisa Halverson, another student from the IP&T program, had just finished a literature review going over the field of blended learning research. And Dr. Graham had started thinking about a model of research that Dr. Gibbons had come up with, and thought it would be interesting to apply that model to look at the different research that had been done in blended learning. Just some quick background on Dr. Gibbons' model. He has three different parts of the model, or there's three different types of research that he sees. There's explore research, explain, and design research. Explore research is the kind of research that goes out and looks to see what is out there. It's taxonomizing, understanding what exists. Explain research is more of the cause and effect type of research, understanding why the relationship exists. And then design research is research that identifies a target outcome and tries to understand how to achieve that desired outcome. And so what we did is we looked at the articles and book chapters that Lisa Halverson had gone over and tried to categorize them using this model from Dr. Gibbons to see what kind of blended learning research had been done. And there was a lot of explore research. Researchers looking to see what kind of blends were out there. And then there were a few design articles looking at, this is a target outcome in blended learning, how can you achieve that? What we noticed was the lack of explain type of research. which I thought was particularly important. Research comparing blended learning to online learning to face-to-face learning noted that blended learning had higher student outcomes, student engagement, but there's a lot that we don't understand for why is this happening. And so this explain type of research could be really useful to the field of blended learning. This second project that I wanted to talk about was one done as a class in Dr. Gibbons' instructional theory course. It was really fun to do a project as a class, and if you have the opportunity to turn class discussions into a research article, I would highly recommend it. It was a lot of work, but it was great to work together as a class on this task. Our article was addressing how we can be better researchers and consumers of instructional theory. We addressed a movement that's happening in the field of instructional design theory to try to create a unified language, so we're all kind of speaking the same terms. And Dr. Gibbons kind of posed the idea of, well, do we need that right now, and is it absolutely essential? And so our article explored the idea of maybe going without the shared language and how we could still have a shared understanding of one another and be more critical consumers of instructional theory. We used the example of ontology from the computer science and artificial intelligence field. The idea with an ontology is that we have two systems that have been developed kind of in parallel to each other, but they both speak different languages. And so if we need the two systems to communicate together, share information together, how can we get them to communicate? And the idea of an ontology is that we're not creating a new language, but we're identifying the similarities between two different languages. So even though we're not speaking the same thing, if we have an ontology that identify the differences and the similarities, the two systems could still work together. And so we try to apply that type of idea to being a reader or consumer of instructional theory. So what I have here below on the screen in the boxes are authors from three different articles that are all addressing this same type of idea, even though they're using different language. And we as a class, as we were reviewing different articles of instructional theory, try to create our own connections between theories and articles and ideas. And so we noticed the similarities in what these three authors were saying and came up with this idea of a mechanism for motivating learners. And as we were making these connections, we could notice what was similar among theorists and what was also different. Additionally, we could identify what was missing. And so this was an opportunity and a tool to identify research gaps and to develop a deeper understanding across different research articles. This third article that I'd like to talk about was one that I got to be a lead on with the project. I worked closely with Bob Bodley in the program. Bob was a lot of fun to work with and has some amazing talents with computer programming. He developed a program that could go and extract click data from the learning management system and clean it up in a way that we could use it for research. And so we did a project where we were trying to explore the data from a learning management system and help and see what it could tell us about learning and how we can improve teaching and learning. And so here on the screen, as you can see, we got this list of URLs. These are coming from the Canvas LMS. And using this list of URLs, we also had timestamps, and we could create page views for a person, what pages they went to, how often they came there, and also how much time they spent on that page. And we kind of just followed the trail of these URLs to recreate the experience that individual students had as they were navigating through the learning management system and participating in a course. We decided to go into a lot of depth with 3 particular students. This chart up here on the right is showing page views per week for 3 different students. One student, her name was Susie. We chose her because she had dropped out in the middle of the semester and didn't do very well in the course for the time that she was there. And then we have Rachel and Anne, both who did really well in the course. Rachel had a few page views, but she did the course successfully. And then we had Anne, who had a ton of page views, who also was successful in the course. So we kind of had 3 different students. We wanted to see, if their behavior in the LMS could help us better understand learning and maybe how we could help learners who are struggling. One thing that we noticed was on the first week that both Rachel and Anne had a lot more page views than Susie did. As we looked at the types of pages that they were visiting, we noticed that Rachel and Anne were both exploring the learning management system. And this learning management system was new to the students, and so it made sense that they were going in and trying to get familiar with the tools of the course, how it was organized. Susie, however, just didn't do much exploring, and that made us wonder how important it is to help our students to get really familiar with the tools that we're using in the class. Another thing that we noticed was that Rachel and Anne were both checking out assignments well before the assignments were due. And this is something that Susie wasn't doing. She would get to an assignment usually the day before it was due, try to get it done. And we thought that this was, an interesting behavior, kind of a procrastinating behavior, that if we could easily identify students who are not getting into the LMS and using it as effectively as others, that maybe an alert could be sent to an instructor who could get involved and try to intervene and to help these students to be more successful in the course. The final project that I want to share is coming from my dissertation. We were taking the next step with the click data from the LMS, and we're looking at how this could be used as a measure of student engagement. Research has shown that student engagement is a useful metric to look at. Students who are engaged tend to learn better and to learn more and to be more persistent in learning. Usually it's measured through a survey, but we were interested in seeing, can we measure student engagement using the click data from the learning management system? And so what we did was we created our own survey of student engagement that students would complete after a specific learning activity. And then we would go and get the click data from the LMS that was concurrent with the time that they were involved in the activity. And what we did was correlate the two. And what we found was that there wasn't much of a relationship. That students' responses on the student engagement survey didn't tend to correlate very well with the amount of page views or time spent on pages in the learning management system. And this was kind of an interesting finding for us. Maybe it's related to prior knowledge that two students may be really engaged, but only one has a lot of prior knowledge while the other one doesn't, and so it doesn't take that person as long to complete an assignment as the student who maybe doesn't have as much prior knowledge. It was a really great opportunity to work on these research projects in my program at IP&T. Again, I'd recommend, if you can, to get involved in some kind of research project and get that experience. It'll definitely be useful to you.
like I'm standing in the dark here. There we go.
So first, one of my recommendations, so I just graduated in the summer, and now in the EIME program. But one of my recommendations, I didn't have slides about other research projects that I've worked on, but one of the things that I got involved in early on when I first started my master's program was doing research with Dr. Rich. And that was a great experience. We went into the schools and did research on computing and engineering, and it was really informative to get into different research situations, look at different research questions and problems, and see how people attack those issues. So one of my things that I really loved about being in the IP&T program was being able to be involved in different programs, and research, writing some articles, doing a book review. That was an interesting experience for me. I'd never written a book review. And so some of those things were really great. This project right here was the project that I did for my thesis. And we studied the developmental math students' calibrated judgments of learning. And so when I was doing my literature review for this research project, I came across a lot of really bizarre studies. And I always would think to myself, why would anyone ever study this? Like, what is the purpose of this? And then I graduated and I finished my thesis, and then people were like, well, what'd you do your thesis on? And I would tell them, and then they would give me that same look of like, why would you ever want to study this? What is the purpose of this? And why would you spend all this time? So my raison d'etre, okay, which is your reason or justification for being, is not personally, but for this particular research project, was that I want to better understand, and I think this kind of goes to my perspective of research in general, but I'm interested in understanding how we can help students kind of take control of their learning and be stewards of their own learning. There's a lot we can do as teachers and researchers to try and influence the situation and the context, but I think ultimately, we all are human beings with agency, and we have to choose to engage. And so this is kind of the reason behind this. So hopefully you can kind of see that as we go through and look at some of the other things that may not seem like they're as directly related to this, but you have to start somewhere, right? So the logic behind it is that in order for students to be able to take control and be stewards of their own learning, they need to be aware of it, okay? If they don't understand, if they're oblivious to their learning process, then it's going to be hard for them to evaluate that and make good decisions and be successful academically. So I wanted to take and kind of narrow in on that idea of being aware of their own learning process and seeing if we can improve that and seeing where people work, okay? And in the past, researchers have found that students who are more aware tend to have higher levels of academic performance, which kind of makes sense, right? That seems intuitive, but other studies have done that and found that relationship. And then other key studies found that people can actually increase their awareness. So you can get someone who maybe is oblivious to a certain situation, and you can help coach them along, and they can become more aware. And as they become more aware, their performance can increase as well. So that was kind of the premise or the logic behind going through this. The research participants, the people that we did the study, was at UVU. So how much time do I have? When do I need to finish up?
You have 6.5 minutes left.
6.5. 6 minutes and 25 seconds. So UVU developmental math students, and it was really a logistic feat to accomplish this study because it was just in traditional classrooms. We weren't doing anything online. It was paper and pencil assessments and collecting data all that way. So I coordinated between 10 faculty members, 17 sections. We had 285 students who consented to be part of the research, but as part of an incentive to the faculty members, I did data analysis for all of their students. So that ended up being about 400 students, which it ended up being quite a feat. Our research questions basically kind of hit these real fast because we wanted to know how aware these students were, and then whether or not they get better over time, and then if there were differences between different groups of students. And one of the reasons why this study I felt it was important is because most of the research on this had been done in laboratory settings, and they didn't use this population. It was usually like you bring students in from a campus for 30 minutes and then they leave and you never talk to them again. You don't get these repeated measures. And then not very many people were giving feedback on their awareness to students. So the way we did this was with this thing called calibrated judgments of learning, which basically, to sum it up really fast, we asked students how well they thought they did on their math questions. So they answered 2 + 2 = 4. And we say, how well do you think you did on that? And they would rate themselves. And then we would compare their rating of their performance to their actual performance. And that's basically where our calibrated judgment of learning comes from. And this was our rating scale. And there's lots of different ways in the literature on how you can compute these calibrated judgments of learning, but there are 2 specific ways that we chose to do it, and this is absolute accuracy, which basically tells you how far off were you. We don't care if you overestimated or underestimated, we just want to know how far off you were. And then the other one is a bias score, which is saying you either overestimated or you underestimated. And so those were the 2 different things that we did there. And so we collected all this data. The students, after they'd answer a question, they'd respond to the survey, how confident they were. Answer a question, respond, answer a question, respond. They did that for all of their math test questions. And then the teachers gave me the results back. And I created a program in R where I analyzed the data and created a form email to send out to them, and we emailed them feedback. And this is kind of some snippets from the feedback. But we gave them a quantitative number of how accurate they were. Gave them some qualitative measures as well, so you were somewhat accurate for this one, which is just kind of a fuzzy thing, but gets them that. And then we gave them a qualitative response there of whether they overestimated or underestimated. We gave them some recommendations on questions they could study, so ones that they were really, really deviant on, where they thought they did really well, but they really bombed it. Those were ones that we gave them some feedback on to go back and review, and gave us some other statistics here. So that was the feedback we gave to them. Now the results. We found that on average students were only 1 confidence interval away from being perfectly accurate, which was very surprising because all the literature that I could find said students really are not very aware. And when you ask them these questions, they're going to be really, really off. And in this case, these students, the developmental math students, were pretty close. One of the things that we found that was that the literature talked about but didn't emphasize very much was how much the item difficulty or how hard the question was influenced their ability to be aware. Like, so if we look at this, so as the difficulty increased, students' accuracy decreased, and that correlation between the 2 was a -0.6. And then, so 36% of the variance in their accuracy was explained by how difficult the item was. So we weren't expecting it to be that big, but that was one of the things we found. This was confirmed in the literature as well, but again, we didn't think it was going to be so drastic, was the difference between high-performing students and low-performing students. People who did well on the test were actually a lot more aware than the people who did poorly on the test. So then here's our bias score. So this is where we have just overestimate, underestimate. If you see here, we had a large number of students who had perfect estimates, which was again something that the literature said that is new. The literature said that they would all be overestimating on average. Where here we had most of them being perfectly estimating and a large number underestimating, which was also something that didn't come up in the literature. We have some reasons why that we think that might be, but I don't have time to go into that. So if you want to talk about those later on. So item difficulty also influenced whether or not they overestimated or underestimated it. So to answer the final question, did they get better? No, they actually got worse. Okay, but the tests got harder. So when we have the difficulty of the test mixed in there, so the tests get harder, and we know that influences their accuracy, then they didn't get better. So we need to design a different study where we can isolate those issues and try to understand that better. Feedback, in the study we didn't design anything to know how they used it. We created the feedback and emailed it to them. So did they open the email? We don't know. Did they read it? We don't know. Did they understand what it was? Not sure. So the effects of that feedback changing their accuracy, that's something that we need to isolate a little better for future studies. So if you were a senior, you were less accurate than if you were a freshman, which was interesting. Maybe because if you're a senior and you're taking developmental math classes, that might mean that there's some other issues that are going on. Who knows? But that was one of the things we found. There was one integrated class where they took two classes, brought them together, and they were twice as accurate. But I think I'm done with my time. So, but there are lots. Like this study was awesome. One, because I was able to be the lead on a research project, and it was a lot of work, and I learned a lot. So my next research project is going to be a lot better. But also because now I have all these other really interesting questions that I want to answer. And so I don't have time to talk about them, but there are lots of things, more questions that come from the research, and it was a really awesome experience. And so there you go. That's my study.
It's actually 4 minutes in the letter. That might be where there's no description. It says measurement, he still has a minute left. And that's okay, here we are. Cool. All right, I'm Kyle Welch. I graduated in June, currently working as a UX designer in Sandy. And I'd like to start my presentation with a disclaimer. If you are doing a master's project, I wouldn't recommend taking as long as I did to complete mine. You know how we have the initial seminar every semester and we stand up and introduce ourselves. There were 3 seminars in a row where I stood up and said, "Hi, I'm Kyle and this is my last semester." But I finally did. I did graduate. Just a few basic facts about the project I did. Over 3 years, I worked with a team of 24 people, building 4 language learning products for 4 different markets, and we conducted over 100 user tests on 4 continents, and these messy graphs show kind of how messy it was. The 24 team members weren't all on the same team at the same time. It was kind of staggered out per project. Because we were dirt poor and we needed developers, one solution we found was to find computer science or IT students who also needed to build a project for their program requirements. And so we teamed up with different batches of students at different phases in the product or in the project. It initially started with 3 of my friends who were also interested in educational technology, and we formed a startup, and the first product is called LingChat. It was for K-12 schools in the US and China, and the basic idea is there are thousands of Mandarin immersion students here in Utah learning Chinese, and millions of students that same age in China trying to learn English, and so we built a platform where they could jump on and video chat with one another in each country and play collaborative language learning games as a way to apply what they're learning and make new friends. This was the interface, and it was a lot of fun. Had some great experiences with the kids. Ultimately, we decided to shift away from this. And I guess I should start by saying my overarching goal with this was to have a product that would have real impact in students' lives. And there were lots of opportunities where we could have folded the tent and said, okay, that was good enough, it was a good learning experience, but we kept trying again in different markets. Ultimately, we decided to move away from this because of all of the logistical constraints of working with schools in China and the US with curriculum and budget and time zone restraints. So we shifted over to families with K-12 students. Parents are typically heavily invested in their kids' education and don't have all the same constraints that schools do. And so we worked with parents of students in Mandarin immersion programs, and particularly during the summertime when the kids were off and needed activities to keep their Chinese up in between school years. So we built Passport, largely similar, just updated interface, crashed a lot less, which was also had lots of great experiences. But we also shifted away from this because of difficulties connecting minors with other minors online. Potential risks there. I mean, one bad experience would have been too many bad experiences. So we shifted to adult learners. Had a new dev team switched over to web app instead of desktop app. But it was the same basic concept. You can create a profile and find people in your target language, who speak your target language, who are also learning yours, and you can do language exchanges where you can video chat with each other, do different language learning activities to build your language skills. And it was around this time that we were actually accepted to a startup accelerator program in Denmark, where they help provide funding and coaching for startups. And so we went there and pursued an opportunity with Danish multinational corporations. We developed a really good working relationship with Lego, who is headquartered about an hour away from us in Denmark, and they told us that they hire tons of people every year from overseas and bring them to Denmark, and they have a language need to help them quickly and effectively learn Danish. Even though they spoke English most of the time at their jobs, they found that retention was so much better. They invest millions of dollars every year acquiring a talent from overseas, and they stayed longer if they learned Danish. So they asked us to build some prototypes and start testing. So they gave us a group of new employees who were learning Danish. The problem was, it was just me and one other partner at this time, and we had no programmers. So I immersed myself in trying to learn as much programming as possible, and built 5 prototypes that we were able to test and improve iteratively with the employees, that had basic lessons that taught the fundamentals of Danish, and then we had basic AI characters that you could practice with. So on different conversation topics. So for hobbies for example, the character would ask, what do you like to do? And if I said, I like to play golf, then they would respond based on what you say and say, oh, I like golf too, where do you like to play? Or, and so we categorized the lessons and the practice activities in the simulation according to the top tasks that the learners said they wanted to do. So going to the grocery store and making a purchase, for example, they were able to sit in your living room and practice making a purchase at a store as many times as you want until you feel confident enough to go out and do it in real life. And it was a lot of fun, really awesome working with Lego. It was kind of a childhood dream of mine, my pilgrimage to Mecca to go to Lego headquarters. I remember one meeting, we were meeting with one of the art directors, and it was in a room with shelves lined with like robots and crazy creations that the Lego art team had made. And the whole time I just could not focus. They would ask me a question, I'd be like, oh, what? Sorry. It was great to work with Lego. Ultimately, it didn't work out because the Danish government introduced brand new additional language courses for free in the area to anyone who moved there. And Lego told us that they decided they were going to go with the free option. And so we came back, and right now we're working on other projects. A virtual reality app for Japanese learners and an iPad app for kids learning how to read. But a few key takeaways. Strongly recommend, if you're working on a project, do your best to try and find a specific target audience and that you can get your product or your app or solution into their hands and strive for impact in the lives of your learners. Empathy should drive everything. Really understanding the learners, their challenges, their desires, and learning goals really dramatically impacts the success of the instructional design iteration. We learn so much more going through a full cycle of iteration with people getting it into their hands and learning than we would have spending that same amount of time planning and imagining and postulating what would happen. Transfer. If you're working with language learning in particular, Reigelut's elaboration theory was extremely useful, and also learned a lot of things about transfer. For example, apps like Duolingo are really effective at certain things, but if your goal is to produce fluency or to help someone get to fluency, there's a higher level of complexity than in a lot of apps where you have to spontaneously build sentences that have never come out of your mouth before in a foreign language with a real person in front of you. That's a higher level of complexity than answering lots of multiple choice questions over and over again. So it's really helpful to create learning activities that can match and prepare for the complexity of real world situations. Learning to code is such a really amazingly useful tool as a designer, to be able to build and test as much as you want. And I'm going to throw out a plug to Dr. Rich, I think he just left, to his programming class, which is arguably the best programming class on campus because it is personalized to where your level is and where your goals are, and it's really effective. And then the last thing, I just want to say thank you to the professors. Probably the best part of my whole experience in the IP&T program. Every professor that I worked with was just amazing. So, thank you.